Folks, let's kick this off. Welcome to everyone. Thank you for joining the Privacy Exchange Communities Show and Tell series with our special guests today, two privacy experts, Kimberly Lancaster and Gwen Takagawa. Kimberly is the founder and CEO of Avalon Privacy and Compliance. She is an experienced privacy, security, and compliance professional with leadership experience with privacy by design, governance by design, and security by design. Kimberly is an inclusive leader, an effective educator, and a trusted mentor to many privacy professionals. Gwen Takagawa is a senior privacy consultant at Coalfire. And I'm just going to say it, she is exceptional. She is high performing at everything she does, including being a privacy consultant, which she's worked in this field since 2022. During that time, she has helped companies of all sizes do better at protecting humans through their data practices. She's experienced at developing and improving privacy programs and tailored their plan specifically to different compliance requirements for CCPA, GDPR, GLBA, and what have you. Prior to Gwen's career in privacy, she was the head of compliance for a highly regulated business. In today's session with Kimberly and Gwen, we will discuss why privacy is a top priority for all businesses, even those on a budget. Kimberly and Gwen will then share strategies on how to prioritize privacy, how to maximize value with your privacy consultant team, and how to track progress against your privacy goals. And so today is really about getting practical tips for building and maintaining your effective privacy program. So how we're going to spend our time is the first 10 to 15 minutes or so, we're going to do an interview with these two, followed by audience Q&A. And I really hope that those in the audience feel free to ask some practical questions, get it out. We'll turn off the recording, so feel free to ask things. This is your shot, folks. We will record the top bit, and we will turn off the recording for the audience Q&A session. So just two quick reminders before we kick it off. First, today's session is for general information purposes only and is not legal advice. So if you need legal advice, contact your own attorney. The second thing is our speakers here are operating in their personal capacity, and Gwen specifically is here in her personal capacity, not speaking on behalf of her employer. So, ladies, are you ready to hop in?
You got it.
All right, my first question is, in today's world of customer trust issues, what are the drivers that you see leading businesses needing to invest in with regards to their privacy programs?
Gwen, do you want to go first?
Sure. What I see is primarily business drivers. So a lot of companies don't come to this from a compliance lens. They're coming from a lens of, we've got a customer, maybe a B2B customer, or we're having conversations where we get a lot of data subject requests. There's something from that business side that is driving the question. I would say that I am, in the introduction that you just gave, Mary, thank you so much. One thing that you said is that I am helping companies better protect people. That is almost never the initial driver, but it is something that I always bring up in conversation because it helps get the people on the company on board with building those business objectives.
All right. The other aspect of it is that you're really thinking about how you're going to build the trust for your customers as the business. You know, face it, privacy is a selling point. It really is. If you can't protect their data, how can you say that you can sign a contract in a B2B or a B2C situation and say that you're going to do these things that you have stated in your contract or your TOCs and stuff?
That's a really interesting perspective because I think a lot of privacy professionals may come from the lens of compliance because that's what we do, but really stepping outside of our viewpoint and bringing in the business's perspective, solving a real business problem, and then adding in the people, the contracts, like meeting, customer expectations is the way to go. So on that topic, what are the key reasons that businesses would look to add a privacy program, and like what does that entail? So we talked, it's not always about compliance as a driver. Tell me more about that.
So what I see a lot of is folks that are looking to expand into the EU. So they know GDPR is a big thing. They don't know what that means. They come to us, they say, what do I need? Do you have a referral for a DPO? How do we get that data protection officer? And they're not even thinking do I need a DPO or not? So starting from just that baseline level of what's actually required, what makes sense for their business, and what can they use to actually have those conversations with folks in the EU that make sense and that don't build on that assumption that kind of comes from that media lens. That's one of the big drivers. So really, before we even get into the contract piece, before we get into what changes need to happen to your privacy notice, it's some of those baseline levels of, if this is your business goal, we're not going to leapfrog over that. We're going to come back to the basics of what does that mean for you and how can you get your foundation in place.
Exactly. And when we talk about, we've got people that, companies that are looking to expand into the EU, we've also got to look at what's going on here in the US. I mean, we've got state laws popping up left, right, all over the place. We just had, there's a lot of stuff going on here. And a lot of companies deal with situations that they may not be aware of. I'm a small business. Do I have to worry about this? Why should I worry about this? Well, if you're selling to people across the United States, you do need to be aware of these things. So having those conversations is very important because everybody is aware. And, there was a stat out the other day that 95% of companies are worried about cybersecurity. Well, how do you help protect work alongside cybersecurity? Have a privacy program.
Right. That
So,
is fascinating because it really speaks again to the approach of thinking of as a compliance, a checkbox. Like I just have this sheet of things and I've just got to check, 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 check. But really, it's fundamentally rethinking how you approach privacy. It is not compliance. It actually is a business driver. And to your
mhm,
point, Kimberly, it's kind of like privacy by design is really a foundation of how you should be thinking about this, not compliance. So I can
right.
imagine when a company realizes, oh no, this was actually not a compliance checkbox thing. This is how I structure my business. How do I back into that? So they may have like budget constraints and like wondering, what should I spend my money on? How do I know what to tackle first when I'm re-envisioning what privacy means to my customers, to my expansion, my M&A strategy? Talk to me about maximizing value, particularly from a consultant business relationship.
Kim, do you want to tackle this one first?
Sure. Budget is always a concern. And, there's a lot of fantastic tools out there. There's a lot of fantastic ways to approach it. I think bottom line, you have to look at the highest risk items. Do your risk analysis, define what the key drivers are that are really important to you as a business and what has to happen first. You can do a lot of things with process. You can fix a lot of things with basic small changes to ways that things happen. I am 100% behind training and awareness. Teaching your employees, don't don't repeat a credit card out loud. Don't ask for this or that when you're gathering information. Have a secure way to track information. Small little changes make really big impacts, and you can do that effectively. You can do it with ease, and you can do it with less expense. Now, if you've got some very high risk things sitting in Excel spreadsheets or in unsecure places, yeah, you need to think about it. But again, take it from a risk approach. Grab the low hanging fruit. Look at what's you got to really spend money on and come to the middle and meet right in the middle with those two and start to tackle things.
Great perspective.
I completely agree with everything you said, Kim. And I want to flip it on its head a little bit as well, because I think
Yeah.
coming at this from that compliance lens and the cost center lens is exactly where a lot of the clients that I see take it the wrong way. It's where, I talk to someone from the legal department and I say, hey, let's talk about privacy by design. And they say, oh, that's going to have business impacts. I got to get permission for that. And, yes, privacy is not just paperwork. So thinking
Right.
about how can we not just think about it from that compliance lens, but think about how it's integrated into those business functions in a way that
Mhm.
builds revenue. So coming back to what we talked about initially on that, this is a business driver. If you can start
Yes.
thinking from that lens, it's your budget piece. Yes, that's important, but it's how can you build more deals, build the business through this lens
Mhm.
in order to meet those compliance requirements, but also have happier customers. And then that will build that flywheel.
Exactly. And I've always said privacy is an ROI tool. People want to know that you're going to take care of their stuff. And you can, if done right, you can actually make a lot of money off of privacy by design and doing things the right way.
That's a really interesting perspective, folks, especially with like privacy is not paperwork. I love that. I'm going to use that.
Yeah.
It's simple. It's like, oh, okay, privacy is ROI. So kind of merging those two. I'm curious what how businesses can actually evaluate what steps they're taking for privacy are making the desired impact, like particularly from like customer satisfaction or winning deals, like deals we would have lost had we not had this privacy program in place, or any kind of other metrics. Like what types of areas do you look at to show this value that it is impacting the business in a positive way?
For
Want to go
me,
ahead, Gwen?
I can. Um,
Yeah.
the resource that I like the best there, the Future of Privacy Forum has a resource that Omer Tanay and Mary Cullinan put together a few years
Mhm.
back. And I love how they break down metrics from the compliance and operations perspective. This is what you need to do when you're in the weeds. And then the other layer that they have is customer centric and impact driven. So when we think back to what are those business drivers, if we're talking about we want to expand into the EU, okay, let's start tracking how many conversations do we have with clients that have that EU or that GDPR exposure, or whichever metric you want to use, whichever framework you're looking to expand into. If you start having that baseline and then add to that, when do we have a privacy professional in the room, or when is there a privacy question asked? Those can start driving like, yes, this is important to our business. Here's what we're trying to achieve. Here's how it directly is impacted. And that's what you want to be talking to those business stakeholders about, not what your SLA is on, or how frequently or how fast you're able to respond to a data subject request. That's not going to tell business something that matters to them.
And to add to that, I mean, there's a cost benefit to things if you're using cloud storage. So you're not doing your backups properly, you're storing things forever, and you don't have a retention policy. You're paying for that cloud storage when you really may not need to, and that's an expense. Cut that down, lose some of that. Hey, there's a little extra money somewhere to put to something else. Having those conversations at both a technical and a sales level um, really allows a business and the ELT to understand where you can drive business improvement and meet the goals of the company.
Really love those two examples, like areas of cost saving. So let's go through and see, maybe you don't need that cloud storage. Let's reduce, storage costs. Like that's a great one. And I also like the one you mentioned, Gwen, of like how many deals
Mhm.
in Europe are we getting where, privacy was a defining factor of winning that deal or expanding that deal. Yeah, really reframing it out of a compliance, like how fast do you respond to a DSR? Like really the question is, did you do it within the legally mandated time frame, unless you have some sort of customer metric, a customer driven metric that you want to do it faster, is not really telling the privacy story. So I'm glad you called that one out specifically. Okay, I have one last question before we open it up to the audience, and that is, for your clients, what kind of ongoing support do you typically provide after an initial privacy program is set up with your consulting, and how do you ensure these clients have long-term success, especially as these needs continue to evolve, because we all know that privacy is very dynamic.
It absolutely is. And I think my experience is going to be very different from Kim's. A lot of the work that I do is a lot of really upfront snapshot work and less carried forward. Now, there absolutely are instances where I do that kind of work and it's more fun when I get to stay in that environment and help influence the shape of things to come. But for the most part, budgets are set and they don't know what they need to do. So there's a delay. And because there's this perception that privacy is a compliance thing, and if somebody doesn't have an immediate compliance driver, they are postponing that to their next budget cycle. So they're doing this snapshot. What do I need to do? What is the risk? How do I understand this? And then they're sitting back and saying, okay, what can I do this year? And then in a year or so, they're going to come back. Frequently, I have customers that come back a year later, and that's when they want, now I understand what I've been able to do on my own. I want to check in and see, how is this progress? How does it compare to competitors? And what can I do next? Here's where I need help because I know now what I can and can't do on my own.
And that's a great comparison. You know, I've done both in-house and the consulting side. And so if you look at it from the in-house, you're consistent. You know, it's an ongoing deal, just, you know, much like what Gwen's talking about. When you're doing consulting, it's often, I try to make sure that when there's new laws that come out and there's things that we need to make sure that they're aware of, or there's changes to, you know, a lot of times people will reach out if there's changes to how they're doing business. They've added a new product or they've added a new service, or, oh, do I need to update my privacy notice? Because I try to leave them with let's check in a year, or let's check in 6 months. Let's do this, you know, so that they have something to work with. Privacy is a ongoing situation that keeping it top of mind with people is really important. Small business, nonprofits, they're trying to survive. They're trying to keep everything going. So reaching back out to them is really important for me because I know that they don't have the means always to do so. So I set the reminders and I do it and keep going that way. But it really comes down to, once you have the awareness and the partnership with them, you want to retain that and you want to make sure that they're good.
I like to hear that you go ahead and proactively reach out to your partners, your clients, and it's a true partnership. And I also really like what you said, Gwen, about your clients coming back with like a competitive interest, like benchmarking. So that's where a privacy consultant can really provide a fresh perspective because you're working across a number of different clients. And then I'm actually curious, and I swear this is the last question before we open it up for Gwen specifically. I'm wondering, are you able to get budget then that second time around outside of compliance function, or can you get it from like a business department? Or maybe we should do another webinar on this. Don't want to put you on the spot.
I have seen it both ways, and it really depends. So we're at the top, we talked about protecting humans, right? And if you can inspire people on the protecting humans, then they are driven to try to find that budget and to try to find the opportunities to make a difference. And they can also build the story better internally on that business case. So if you can get that spark, and I work really hard to try to get that spark. I have, I'll pull out my hat. I have a hat that says privacy is good for business. And I play client bingo to see how many times I can get that out during an engagement. But sharing my enthusiasm and sharing that piece of protecting humans, that's, to my mind, that's what helps drive that business, because people are invested personally in how can we make that impact. And then that drives I can see how this is going to make sense from a business lens. And then that drives the budget and that drives change.
I love it. This was so incredible. We'll go ahead and turn off the recording. So thank you to everyone who has tuned in to the recording. We're now going to turn off the recording.